She's Katie Montgomery. He's Justin Joseph. These best friends are serving subpoenas to bad advice weekly with Wrong Way Forward. The advice column reboot you never knew you needed. Sparks fly. And so does the hilarity. Now, here's Katy and Justin.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. As you can see, this is the first week that Katy and I are broadcasting from our own studios. You can see my beautiful Wrong Way Forward sign here, and you can see Katy's. Katy, you want to point yours out just in case?
I mean, it's kind of tiny. I did that on my home printer. It's an inkjet.
Anyway, welcome back to the podcast. This week, we're taking on advice about friendships and sort of how you move in that world.
And I think what's really interesting is friendships evolve. We grow, we have experiences, we become different people as we age, and some friendships blossom. Others might kind of fade away, and some kind of become renewed based on kind of a common set of experiences or values. And so I think the big question today is, how long do we hold on to friendships and why?
Absolutely. And I think that that's really frames well what this advice column is about today. Neither Katy nor myself have children. This advice column kind of tackles that and how a couple navigates a world where their adult children have grown and they're friends with someone else who have young children and how they sort of move in that world. So without further ado, let's read the question this week. It was a question to Dear Abby, and the question reads like this. Dear Abby, I want to end a relationship. My husband and I met a couple through mutual friends about 3 years ago. We are 20 years older than they are, and they live an hour away. When the mutual friends moved away, we thought that would be the end of it. But the couple pursued a friendship and guilted us into making the long journey to hang with them, stating that we were their only friends. I have raised children. I'm no longer interested in being around toddlers. My husband disagrees. He thinks we should continue the charade to our immense displeasure. That's the question that she asked. And to which this person responded, Dear Disconnection, I disagree with your husband. The problem with playing charades is that not all players are able to decode the pantomime. Save yourself a world of frustration in addition to the money you are spending, and tell the couple that it is time for them to make their own friends with other parents of young children in their community. Katy, right way or wrong way forward?
Right way and wrong way. So I think, first of all, when I hear something about I have immense displeasure with a person, I'm like, run for the hills. Life is too short. These people are, moving on. They have an empty nest. Why would you want to actively spend time, money, and energy on something that brings you immense displeasure? So that's the first thing. But I think Abby is a little tough. I think her advice is the wrong way forward. And you don't have to, school someone and be patronizing and say, go find your own friends. I think that's just a very nasty way to send a message. So I do think saying, you know what, we're kind of reshuffling our priorities. We're going to be spending time more in our space and where our children are away. And I don't think we're going to be able to make it, out for visits anytime soon.
Okay. I agree and disagree to some extent. So firstly, I think that this issue is not just about their children. I think this couple clearly does not like this friendship anymore. Do you agree with that statement?
I do agree. And I think what is interesting is, this person is trying to project back onto this couple. They're like, she guilted us or they guilted us. And I'm like, you are a free, competent, this
adult,
is not under duress adult. And if you feel guilty, that's on you. And so I think what's interesting is she's clearly having some emotional turmoil about this. It's going to be a very awkward conversation. And so what she's trying to do is steel herself and give herself some reason. And so it's easy to go into kind of that person's a bad person. They guilted me. Therefore, it's going to be easier for me to do this awkward and difficult thing.
Agreed. And I think it's disingenuous for, at least I'll speak for myself, to say that, of course, there are times when I have friends and they have children. And, that does automatically create some distance because I don't have children. They, I think, carry some parents' guilt that they don't like bringing their children around me because they think their children either will misbehave or annoy me. And that could not be further from the truth. On the flip side, I also, I think it's fair if I don't want to be around their children all the time. But I do think, I was thinking about it this morning. When you get married, you take the vows of marriage, right? For richer or poor, until death do us part, in sickness and in health. I think two of three of those apply to friendships, Rich or poor, you're still friends. In sickness and in health, you're still friends. Till death do us part does not come into the friendship vow, but if you have children, I think does. I think it's a fourth vow that needs to be added in.
Well, and I do think friendships can have a lifetime. And I think some of that is the duration of your life, and they are lifelong friends, and you continue to have things in common. And rather than displeasure, they bring you joy and delight. And I
Hmm.
think some people not so much. And, and I have some friends that were, we were joined at the hip and we still have a relationship, but I would consider us now more acquaintances. We live in
Hmm.
different places, we took different career paths, we might have stayed local versus kind of had moved kind of more globally, and we just have kind of different interests. I mean, I am such a drastically different person than I was in high school. I mean, my politics have completely changed. My life experiences have changed. And one of those things that has drastically changed is that I do not have children. So even though I take great delight in my friends' kids and I find that so interesting, we're at that time in our life where people are, taking their kids and moving them into college, and they're going in for parents' weekend. And what I'm finding is some of my kind of common friends connecting even more so because they share that in common, where I'm not going to be at a parents' day this fall. And so that's okay. And I think it is okay for friendships to have different seasons and to kind of ebb and flow. And I don't think that there should be guilt involved in that. And I also don't think that people should pressure, and also I kind of want to say to this couple, not the couple who wants to kind of cease the friendship, but the other couple is read the room. I mean, again, emotional contagion. I sound like a broken record, but I am sure that this elder couple is sending out some very clear signals of
And
not
if they're
wanting
not,
to
they
get
should
in a
be.
car.
If not, they should be, right?
Well, I mean, you just can't hide immense displeasure. I mean, we're
I
not
know
playing
you can't.
charades here. I mean, we're up for an Oscar in this case. I mean, what the hell?
No, I totally agree. And, I'm sure the signs have been set, and it makes me sad for this couple with children because, like you said, if they're not seeing it, they should be. And I don't want to say they're a sad case, but that's kind of what it feels like.
But Justin, if you were to advise the older couple about how to kind of cease the friendship, or to at least kind of put it, slow it down quite a bit, what kind of advice would you give them? Because we are going to talk later about ghosting, and we're going
Yeah.
to talk about ghosting more in the professional context. But ghosting, I think we both agree, is not kind. And so they can't just completely ignore these people. But what's a way to do this in a kind, generous, lovely way?
Well, firstly, I cannot believe you're asking me this because, I'm literally the king
I'm,
of
I'm a
being.
little shocked too.
I'm the king of being aggressive, especially, and this is going to sound bad, especially if I don't know the person. And if you listen to our podcast, there are specific examples of where I have no problem taking someone on if I don't know you. But we're all going through this, and I'll speak for myself, going through this in my own life with certain groups of friends where we don't share the same experiences. We haven't had the same connections, and it's like, how do you grow apart without being unkind? I think is what you're asking, and my passive aggressive side says you just let the friendship, kind of fade. Josh, my husband, has a different. He doesn't let anybody go, and so he would hang on and text and keep pushing to maintain the friendship. And I'm like, let the friendship go. It's died. And so, I think if you're asking, do you have to actually take that on and say we're no longer friends? I'm not of that school necessarily, because I think the kind thing to do is to kind of let it fade. But similarly, if they're not getting the message, then I think it may be worth a conversation, a tough conversation, but a conversation nevertheless.
And I think a piece of advice that Abby forgot is we have a husband and wife who are on two sides of the coin on this. The wife is like, let's dump them tomorrow. And then the husband's like, keep your mouth shut. Let's just keep playing along. So I think a piece of advice that Abby missed out is you and the husband need to get on the same page. Because when you are a couple and you have couple friends, sometimes people can pair off, and so we need to make sure that we're on the same course of action.
Right.
And I think that would be a first good step as they move forward in possibly ceasing this friendship.
And I thought another good example is when you came in to visit me. I mean, a dog is not a child, and you're deathly allergic to dogs, but you really don't want to be around dogs, and that's my child. If you're seeing a fly around my head, I'm not Mike Pence. It literally, we've been on this podcast for an hour, and suddenly this fly cannot get off my face. So anyway, back to what I was talking about originally. You don't like to be around dogs, and like the dog is my child. So in many cases, this is kind of what you were in the middle of the last time you were with me.
Well, I mean, but I have to tell you, we're very, very good friends. In fact,
Right.
we're best friends. And so I did say your dog was cute. I let the dog sit next to me. I would say, "Hey, doggy, hey," in the morning, but I drew the line at when it wanted to lick me. And I think
Lick
that's
your
fair.
leg.
And I think we have an open enough friendship to say your child cannot lick me. That's just
Okay.
not appropriate.
I totally agree. And I think it's a great example because, again, what I think, for my girlfriends who have children or my guy friends who have children, I make the effort, however uncomfortable, and I'm not uncomfortable at all around them, but maybe they think I am. But I think the important thing is you make the effort because that's what you do for friends.
And the effort goes both ways. I mean, I'm really curious about my friends' kids. I ask about them, how they're doing. I know certain kind of factoids about them if they started a new school or they involved with a certain activity. But also, I think that good friendships, people need to be kind of self aware. It's not necessarily my cup of tea for us to spend our entire time together doing a deep dive into your kids. Relationships go both ways. And so it might be a question that might be, Katy, how's the podcast going? So I think, again, the idea is relationships are give and take. And really good ones are honest and open, and they're very attuned to what's happening in the other person's life and what's going around, and it's picking up. And I want to just state for all of the listeners out there, because my brother says I'm a horrible person because I don't like dogs. And I want all of our listeners to like me more than they like you. And I'm afraid you just got a head start there, is that I do have asthma and I am allergic. I don't dislike dogs because they are dogs.
Right.
I dislike being unable to breathe. And so I just want to, state that one for the record.
Absolutely. So on the other side of the break, let's do our takeaways. For me, it's going to be, let's come up with our new vows of friendship for everybody who's not married out there. So let's do our vows of friendship, what our big ones are, and then we'll take your emails on the other side. We will be right back with Wrong Way Forward after this.
You've been listening to Wrong Way Forward, where bad advice goes to die and then gets resurrected just so we can roast it again.
That's right, Katy. Nobody's off limits, not the gurus, not the influencers, and definitely not Oprah.
Sorry, Oprah.
If you're enjoying the chaos, hit like and subscribe and come back every Thursday for new episodes.
Have a new topic or some disastrously bad advice you want to dissect? Email wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Include your contact info.
Now back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin podcast.
And we're back with Wrong Way Forward. And I think Justin had a few vows of friendship. If you could just repeat those for our listeners.
Yeah, we were talking in the last block about how the vows of friendship very closely mirror the vows of marriage. In sickness and in health, we're best friends. Richer or poorer, we're best friends. Death do us part, no, we're not necessarily best friends. Friendships may have a lifetime. And to that, I would add, whether you have children or not, we're best friends. Katy, what about you? Any other vows of friendship you want to add?
I would add, you must keep me incredibly entertained and keep me laughing. And if I experience immense displeasure, the vow is broken.
And by the way, that would apply for marriage as well. So maybe we need to add those into the
Correct.
marriage
I mean,
vows.
again, 51 and single. So.
All right. So on our last episode of Wrong Way Forward, we were taking on the advice of Tony Robbins. And Katy, do you want to highlight what we thought was bad advice there?
So Tony Robbins came out and said, basically, people have had horrible things happen in their life and they've been able to come out on the other side and be happy individuals, which we don't disagree with. But he said that the way that he manages that is he gives himself 90 seconds to refocus on happiness. And I think both of us were like, well, that's kind of ridiculous. Emotions are intense. Trauma can happen. There's certain stages of grief. And so we've got some viewer comments based on kind of what our reaction was to Tony Robbins' advice, the wrong way forward. And so, Justin, would you like to read something that you heard from one of your listeners, which I know you're going to share something that is incredibly flattering for you and probably embarrassing for me. So
Well,
go ahead.
surprising, this week's emails are not necessarily as critical as you, because I think to some degree we agreed that Tony Robbins' advice was the wrong way forward. So they weren't necessarily as mean as they have been in the past, but here's a few of them. Katie, I loved that you called out Tony's fake energy. Spot on. But I think you actually sold yourself short. You clearly saw through him, but Justin went a little deeper on why his 90-second rule is harmful. Next time, don't be afraid to go further. Your insights are just as sharp. I thought that was a nice one.
Thank you, listener.
That was from
Agree,
Rachel.
but I've got a few to share too.
And you're going to go mean.
I mean, we'll see. And so it says, Justin, you said Tony Robbins' high energy turns you off because it's not authentic. But if you listen to the show, Katy has a lot of energy. She's passionate, uses strong language, and is very vocal about her opinions. How is her energy different from Tony Robbins in a way that makes her authentic and his fake?
Oh,
I just want to state, I agree, Tony Robbins is fake. I just love this because I think this reader thinks I'm a little fantastic.
I agree. And I also would say it's a real simple answer to that. Katy's energy is authentic, and I don't think Tony Robbins is. He's put on for camera. So that viewer, listener, I agree with you 100%. That's my answer to that. All right, dear Justin and Katy, I love the episode, but Katy, I feel like you were hedging. You said Tony felt creepy and inauthentic. 100% agree, she says. But then you still gave the advice that more credit than it deserved. Justin cut straight through the nonsense. And that's why I'm on Team Justin on this one. And I loved this from Maya L. I agree. I thought that, as not surprisingly, I think that I went straight to the point. I'm not a fan of Tony Robbins. I think to spout out a get over it in 90-second rules is as silly as to say you're going to end a friendship because somebody else has children and you don't. So absolutely agree with this listener. And yeah, I'm on Team Maya.
Okay, well, I have Marianne from Phoenix, and she says, Katy brought up the 5 stages of grief, which is a well-established psychological concept. Justin, on the other hand, talked about being on the couch for a week over a lost real estate listing. Don't you think Katy's approach to dealing with real trauma is a lot more thoughtful and valid than your mourn it and move on attitude?
And you agree or disagree with this listener?
I agree with the listener.
Well, I would say if you knew me, you would understand why I'm on the couch for a week if I lose a real estate deal. That doesn't just apply in real estate. That could apply in any form, anything in which there's a competitive aspect. Right now, I'm in a fantasy football league. I almost lost a game the other night. That would have been 2 weeks on the couch. So it's not just about money. It's about winning and losing. And that's just who I am, listener.
Well, I love that you give basically your livelihood 1 week, but you give a fantasy football game, which is a series of points. I mean, this is like one of many 2 weeks. So I think we might get some listener comments next week about kind of like rationality and proportionality.
Well, like I said, that's just part of who I am. Do you think you're competitive, Katy? I know you are, but
I am competitive. I can tell you that as I age, I feel like what I'm competitive about really is not as much. And I think also it aligns more with my values and where I want to spend my energy. So having kind of been in a lot of different situations and maybe kind of going 90-0 on a lot of things, I now am really trying to be like, what's most important, what matters the most in my life, and then really doubling down on those things. But I think if you have a competitive spirit, it really never goes away. And anytime I'm with my niece and my nephew, I will do a lap in the pool and beat them every time and talk about it all evening long.
Do you let them win at games?
No. Do you let your nieces and nephews win a game?
Hell no.
My parents never let me win a single thing. And my dad, God bless his soul, we would be like, who's the smartest in the family? And he would never, ever even just take a breath. And he would say, I am, hands down, no question.
I am meaning him or meaning you?
No, he.
Okay.
He was the smartest. So I come from competitive people, so it comes naturally.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's what's interesting is your career path has not necessarily been a win-lose career path, whereas that's literally the careers I've chosen. As a prosecutor, either won or lost a case. As an reporter, either got the story or I got beat. And I can count on the number of on one hand the number of times I got beat because I did not get beat on stories. It just would that I would be on the couch for a month.
Yeah, I was
And
about to
then
say, so your career has been, win or lose, and it seems like you've either been on the couch or out celebrating.
yeah, and maybe that's a therapy session on its own, not for the Wrong Way Forward podcast, however. So when we come back, we're going to talk about ghosting. Katie, give us an idea of what that's going to look like.
So we're going to talk about ghosting, and I think probably when people think about ghosting, they think about dating someone, going back and forth, hanging out with someone, and then one day they just disappear. Poof, they're gone. I think what I'd like to kind of focus on is about ghosting in the professional context and why that is happening. Is that appropriate, or is it really the wrong way forward? We'll be back.
Thanks for streaming Wrong Way Forward, the weekly reminder that advice is usually free for a reason. We call out bad advice wherever it hides: boardrooms, break rooms, and even book clubs.
Enjoying this dumpster fire? Like, subscribe, and check back every Thursday for new episodes. Want us to roast your favorite piece of nonsense? Email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to include your contact info. We're not psychic, just judgmental. And now, back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin.
So thanks for joining us on our latest episode of Wrong Way Forward. This week we have covered how friendships end and begin and what the vows of friendship are. And as part of that, because we've all been in this situation, we're going to talk about ghosting, because that certainly can apply not only in friendships, but in relationships. And for me, at any specific party, because I am one of these people who loves the Irish exit. You can call it ghosting, but I am not a fan of sitting and saying goodbye to 50 people. Whereas Josh, my husband, I literally give him a 10-minute warning, because if I do it as we're leaving, he will want to go say goodbye to everybody, and it makes me insane. So that's my definition of ghosting. Katie, why don't you talk about what yours is?
Well, I think of ghosting is you literally just go poof. I mean, the Irish exit, and I also learned from some of my students from Spain, they call it a Spanish bomb. It just kind of goes off and goes poof. I don't think of that as true ghosting, because it doesn't mean that you're never going to engage with those people, that you're not going to continue a relationship. I think ghosting is literally you just poof, you ghost out of sight, and there's no longer any interaction. There is no closure. There's no conversation. And it leaves the other party that's been ghosted kind of in a space of ambiguity. And it also leads the person who's been ghosted to just ask a lot of questions, and to be completely honest, make up a lot of stories about why did you ghost me? And those things can drive people insane. And the reason that I thought that this was so relevant is I have kind of two professional stories, but one that I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
My brother hired a nanny and someone who would do kind of light housekeeping. And that person wasn't even there a full 2 weeks. And
So set up, how many kids does your brother have and all of that?
He has 2 kids, 5 and 8. They're fantastic, really interesting, high energy kids. And he gets a call at work from their school saying no one's picked up the kids. And so goes into kind of a panic, like, oh my gosh, is the nanny okay? What's happened? We've got an issue here. Fortunately, the kids were picked up. Nothing happened. He gets home, and waiting at the front desk are keys and then also the parking pass.
You are kidding me. So he hires a nanny, and one of her jobs was to pick up the children, and she ghosted?
She ghosted. And there were multiple texts, multiple phone calls. Are you okay? What happened? Is there an explanation? Based on your leaving the keys and the parking pass, we're assuming you're not coming back. But again, there was never any, kind of professional reason, discussion, or even just, an explanation of, I'm no longer going to be continuing in this employment. And that is ghosting in a professional setting. And
that is almost criminal, I would think. I mean, that's crazy.
It's crazy, and it's really the wrong way forward. And I think we've all racked our brains. The kids are fine. My brother and his wife are super resourceful and smart. They've already got a plan in action. But there's still this lingering question as why? Mm-hmm. Why did you do that? But also, do you not have the courage to kind of have a face-to-face conversation to explain that you no longer wish to stay in the role? And I think it's a really kind of cowardly action. And I think it gets back to kind of set values, How do you hold yourself out professionally? How do you communicate and have awkward conversations?
Hmm.
How do you give kind of real feedback? And it's incredibly important in the professional workplace so people can manage their reputations, people can continue to provide growth and development opportunities, but also people need feedback, as to what's kind of going on, and therefore they can make change and they can adapt. This kind of ghosting, it leaves people just in this, what is that called, Justin? We're both Catholics. Purgatory. Leaves you in a
Purgatory.
bunch of purgatory.
Yeah, 100%. And firstly, I'm just shocked by that story. But secondly, it makes me wonder: are there situations where ghosting may be acceptable? I'm trying to think of some. I guess if a relationship was bad, and we talked about this in Block A. If a relationship is bad and you're not sure how to end the friendship, is ghosting okay in that situation?
I mean, I think there has to be probably some situations, but I want to kind of give you another shocking story of just kind of professional ghosting.
Yeah.
So my father passed away a little over 2 years ago. There was his kind of almost lifelong professional accountant, was put on as executor of the estate. My brother and I, who both have legal training, joined as kind of co-executors. We had a very serious conversation. I think we know that I am um, very much just getting down to business, and had a conversation with this person. Can you move forward? It was some complex paperwork. And I tend to be a little type A. I like a checklist. I like to know things are moving
I
forward.
know
I
this
like an
about
open
you.
line of communication. And as the paperwork was moving forward to file certain federal, tax, state, and local documents
Hmm.
that would literally hold my family accountable, the accountant stopped responding,
You're
did
kidding
not
me.
respond to texts, phone calls, emails. And we ended up finding another accountant who is amazing. So if anybody needs any recommendations, this is out of Birmingham, Alabama, and fantastic. And if anybody from Tupelo wants to drop me a private DM, I will let you know who you should not be using. Um, but he said in his 20 plus years of working as an accountant, he had never seen such poor behavior in his life. So completely ghosted by the accountant.
Wow.
Didn't have the nerve to say, this is beyond my capacity and my capability. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I'd like to make a referral. Nobody fell on the sword. And I am coming away from this thinking, what a coward.
Hmm.
And this is a grown ass adult man.
So
You know,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yep,
I was going to,
it.
here's the question, firstly, that's shocking, and not that matters. How old was this man? Not that that's an excuse.
I mean, I would say at least 60.
Oh, wow. And
Yes.
this comes back to the same thing about friendship. Did you take him on? Did you tell him he had failed you? Did you consider legal action? Did you consider filing a claim on his insurance? How did you handle it? Obviously, you got a new accountant, but were you aggressive in taking it on? And should you be?
There was only so much at a certain point, and I think people do get, and I feel like I have dozens of these examples where when you are handling grief and there are so many moving pieces, you have to protect your energy and your strength and moving forward. And it's one of these things that, again, what he's done is be unprofessional and he's been a coward, but he has left us with all of these questions as to who would do this and why would you do this. And it really makes you question humans and their values, and their motivators, and how they can wake up and actually put one foot in front of the other. I would be so absolutely ashamed and mortified. And so it's one of those just crazy things in life that it's like we have different value systems.
I'm curious because, of course, you know me. I would have called him and let him have it, and I would have left him a bad
If
review.
you call him and let him have it, but he won't pick up the phone, what are you
Uh,
supposed to do? I
yeah,
mean, he
no, this is
literally would not pick up the phone. At one point, I even called and his secretary answered and I said, this is out of control. Could you please, here is the context. I think any person would have empathized with me. And I think he had advised his secretary to not answer the phone. I literally could not. The only thing that I could have done is leave DC, physically go to Tupelo and camp out in front of his office and hope that he showed up. that is how I could have verbally told him that I was disappointed.
All right. Well, I think that that's a good way to wrap up this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. Coming up, we're going to still take on great advice that we don't think is so great, but advice that nevertheless. And we'll see you next week on Wrong Way Forward.
Yeah, and we would really love to hear from you. If you have any bad advice, if you've had an experience, please drop us an email at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com.
All right, we'll see you next week.
All right, that's a wrap on this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. Remember, the only thing worse than taking bad advice is giving it.
If you've liked what you've heard, like, subscribe, or follow us wherever you stream podcasts. And if you've got a topic or need some advice we'll probably regret giving, email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Wrong